and welcome to Crafts with Ash, DIY and Decor. My name's Ashley, and today I'm going to bring you 3 really fun pumpkin DIYs. Now, all these DIYs are made from items from the Dollar Tree, so they are very affordable and easy to make. Today's also special because it is in collab with Giulia over at Crafting with Giulia, and she is so talented. I'm going to talk a little bit more about her later, but first, if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Then hit that little notification bell so you can get notified anytime I upload a new video. Then hit that drop-down menu and click all so you're notified about all notifications. Then join me on Facebook and Instagram and let's get social. Join my crafting community by giving me a like and a follow. Sometimes I post behind-the-scene content I know you don't want to miss. All right, let's get started with these fun DIYs. For my first DIY, I'm going to start off with this summer sign, and it's like the arrow sign. So all I'm doing is pulling off the ribbon on the back, and you want to be careful because they are stapled in. And then I'm just going to take my sanding block and I'm going to sand down the holes because they were just a little rough. Now I'm going to have to cut these down in order to make my DIY. So I'm going to grab this knife and my little cutting board, and all I'm going to do is use one as a straight edge and then just cut off the arrow part. And I'm going to do that to 2 of these boards. So as you can see, I'm using the one that I cut down as a straight edge for the other one. And all I'm doing is taking my knife and I'm scoring it a few times until it allows me to bend it back and forth and eventually break off. And then you also want to sand down the edges. After that, I took the 3rd board and I'm just going to cut out 2 rectangles. Now, I do end up changing this part, but I wanted to show you that I did this because this could give you an idea on how to actually use this. But in reality, you actually want about half of that little square that I just cut. So this will make more sense as the video goes along, but I did cut off 2 of these squares. Now I am left with 2 long boards and 2 squares. So at first I start off hot gluing my squares at the very ends of one of the boards because we're going to make a little box. But like I said, I do end up changing it, but I did want to walk you through this because you can still use that 3rd little sign to do this part. You just don't want them this wide like I had them. They could really each get cut down in half. And like I said, this will all make sense in just a little bit. But I just made sure to secure them down with hot glue. And then after I had both of my sides on, I hot glued on the top. And you want to make sure that it's all lined up and flush with each other. After that, I'm going to take my Mocha Apple Barrel paint and I'm going to paint this entire thing. Real quick, I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to my YouTube channel. If you're new, thank you so much for choosing to stop by today. I hope you stick around with me for a while by hitting that subscribe button. I am almost to 8,000 subscribers and I would love for you to help get me there. If you're returning, thank you so much for coming back and I hope you love what you see. Next, I took these 2 pumpkins that I got from the Dollar Tree. This bigger one has raised little wood pieces, and then this other one is a tray. So all I need are the pumpkins from the tray. So I tried to cut them off, and I learned that if you just stick your blade in between the pumpkin and the little tray part, and then just slide down, it comes off so easily. It just breaks whatever is holding it, glue, I don't even know, but it just comes off so easily. So it is a lot easier to get off than I thought it would be. And then you just kind of bend it back and forth and break the bottom off. Then of course you want to sand the edges so they are nice and smooth. Next, it's time to paint. So for the first pumpkin, the solid one, I painted that in my pumpkin Waverly chalk paint. For the second pumpkin, I painted that with my moss Waverly chalk paint. Now, I forgot to mention, but you probably see that I am not painting any of the stems on any of these pumpkins because I'm going to do something different. Then for my bigger pumpkin, I'm going to paint that entire thing with the ivory chalk paint from Waverly. Next, I'm going to add highlighting to all of my pumpkins. To do this, I took a really small brush and then my chocolate bar apple barrel paint, and I just highlighted the edges. Now, I did switch to a makeup sponge because I thought that it might be easier, but you're going to see that I kind of keep going back and forth between the two. So for this pumpkin with the little slats, I just went around them and really just added some highlighting. I also did this same method to the bigger pumpkin and the orange pumpkin. Now for the orange pumpkin, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to take my makeup sponge and I'm going to go around the edges, and you can see that I'm really not putting a lot on, and I'm using my finger to smear it and kind of blend it all in. Then for the middle, I'm just kind of creating those pumpkin lines by doing 2 bigger lines and then 2 of them in the middle. But in a little bit, you're actually going to see that I actually kind of change this up a little bit. For the bigger pumpkin, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm just going to put some paint around the edges and then use my finger to smear it and blend it in. Now, I did not put any lines in the middle of any of those slats. I just kind of traced around them on the edges, which you'll see. But I really love this method. I think it makes it look so rustic, but also it adds a lot of dimension to these pumpkins. Next, to add just a little bit more detail, I took the same brush that I painted the big pumpkin with the ivory paint, and I just dry brushed that over my green and orange pumpkins. Then this is where I decided to change up the orange pumpkin a little bit. I had this leftover wooden egg from Easter time, so I decided to hot glue that to the middle of the pumpkin to give it that raised wood look. And then I went ahead and painted that with that orange pumpkin paint, and then once that's dry, I'm gonna go ahead and put those highlighting lines on there. Now, I did have to go over at the bottom where the words were, it said Hobby Lobby on them. I did have to go over that a few times with that paint to get it to completely cover. So now I'm just adding my highlighting pumpkin lines, but I really loved doing this because it just made it more dimensional and just kind of changed it up a little bit. And the other 2 pumpkins had something kind of special about them, so I felt like this needed something special too. Now for the stems, I started in the back of each pumpkin and I just simply wrapped each stem with twine. And then I'm just putting hot glue just here and there as I see fit. Now it gets a little trickier as you get to the top because it gets skinnier, but you're just gonna have to use more hot glue and just kind of hold it and just work with it, and then eventually you will have it covered. But I did this on all 3 of my stems. After that, I took my box, and this is where I decided to change it. So the first thing I did was deconstruct it, and I took it apart. So now, instead of having those square pieces on the end, I am going to hot glue a Jenga piece to each end. I'm doing this because it's going to make it a skinnier, narrow box, because I did not need it as big as it was. Now, if you don't have tumbling tower blocks, this is when I said you can just take those rectangles that I cut out and cut them in half, and that should be about the same width. But see how much skinnier that is now? That is what I was going for in the first place. And then after I got those glued on, I just went ahead and painted those with that mocha paint. Now it's time to assemble our piece. So the first thing I did was I added some hot glue to the back of the big pumpkin, and I hot glued that to the back piece of my box. Then I hot glued a tumbling tower block on each side of the big pumpkin and hot glued my little pumpkins on top of those. Don't you love those colors together? They're so pretty. After that, I took the raffia bow that originally came on that big pumpkin, and I went ahead and hot glued it to the big pumpkin. And then I hot glued a raffia bow to the orange one, and I will hot glue one to the green one. I just didn't have it made yet. Next, I took this pack of metal words that I got from the Dollar Tree, and they do have them this year again. And I took the word harvest, and I'm going to paint that with a few coats of black acrylic paint. Now, what's really weird is that it actually kind of came out rustic, like the paint didn't really stick, but I liked how it looked. After that, I took one of the longer dowel rods and I cut just a little piece off of it because we're going to make a handle. So once I had those cut down, I went ahead and sanded the edges, and then I hot glued the smaller piece on top of the longer piece to make a T look. Then I painted that with the black acrylic paint as well. After those pieces were dry, I took my word, and because metal and hot glue do not mix, I'm going to use this super glue from the Dollar Tree. I think it's called the Fix All glue or something like that. And I'm going to go ahead and add some of that for the permanent hold, and then add some hot glue for the immediate hold. And I'm going to hot glue that to the front of my box. And then before I put the handle on, I need to put a Jenga piece at the bottom. So you're gonna see that it actually fits right in perfectly at the bottom of my box, just fits right there, and you do want it to hang out. Then I took my mocha paint and covered that as well. I think I forgot to mention that this piece that I'm making was actually something I saw on Pinterest, and unfortunately I don't remember where it was originally from, but once I saw it, I thought it was so pretty and new. I had all the stuff to make it, so I really wanted to try. So after that, I went ahead and grabbed these mason jar lids that I had left over, and I'm gonna paint the outside of the jars with black acrylic paint. Now you do need to give each one of these several coats because the acrylic paint doesn't cover over metal well, but after a couple of coats it did work. Then I took the inside of the mason jar and I'm going to flip them upside down, and I'm going to trace a circle by using my paint bottle, and I am going to my paintbrush broke as I was doing that. I'm going to paint the little circle that I had traced with that mocha paint, and I'm going to do that on both of these little lids. Next, by using that super glue and hot glue, I'm going to glue the insides of the lids to the outsides. And of course, I'm going to put them upside down so that way the part that I painted is facing out. Then by using my hot glue, I'm going to glue my little wheels to either end of my box. Next up, I'm going to take my little handle and I'm simply just going to glue that to the end of that little Jenga block that is sticking out. And then I did tack it down on top of the orange pumpkin to help give it extra support. After that, it's time to make a stand for my little wagon. So remember those square pieces that I had? I went ahead and glued that one to each one of my wheels on the back. And I did this just to give it an extra layer of support and to add some weight on the back so it wasn't so top heavy. See how it's falling back? And then I took 2 Jenga blocks, I hot glued them together side by side, and then I'm going to hot glue those to the bottom of the squares. Now I do end up adding another layer of tumbling tower blocks to give it even more weight, and that seemed to do the trick. Now, just a little tip, when you make stands like this, you do want to, as you are placing your blocks down with the glue on, before you press down and adhere it, you do want to stand your piece up and lean it back a little bit. That way it's supported when it stands up. And there we go. Now it's standing on its own. So now I'm going to go ahead and make that third raffia bow. Of course, this one doesn't look as good as the other ones that came from other, decor pieces. But I'm just going to go ahead and hot glue that to the stem of my green pumpkin and then cut off any extra raffia. And then to add just a little bit more dimension and make it look a little bit more rustic, I'm going to take my Waverly Antique Wax and my chippy brush and just dry brush over my wagon. I absolutely love how this came out. Like I said, this was an inspiration from Pinterest, and I love these colors together. I didn't think I would, but I really do. But what do you think? So like I stated earlier, I am doing a collaboration with Giulia over from Crafting with Giulia, and she has some of the most unique DIYs. She is so talented. Look at all of those cute little gnomes, but she is also rustic in some ways too. I mean, look at that piece. Isn't that gorgeous? I'm gonna have her video linked in my description box below so you can check out all of her pumpkin DIYs that she has for us. And if you go to her channel, be sure to say hi and that I sent you in her comments. And if you're coming over from Giulia's channel, welcome, and I hope you love what you see. Comment below and tell me that she sent you. Now back to the DIYs. For my second pumpkin DIY, I'm going to be using these cardboard tubes from the Dollar Tree, and I have one big one with the lid on. I have the same one, but I took the lid off, and then this smaller one that says happy birthday. So the first thing I needed to do was take the tag off of the smaller one. So I just used my hair dryer and a scraper to go ahead and scrape it off, and it came off really easily. Then I attempted to take off the tags of the other ones, except for they are part of the cardboard, so it's not a sticker. Next, I'm going to paint all 3 of these tubes with that pumpkin Waverly chalk paint. And I did do a few coats just to make sure that the writing on this one was completely covered, but you can get away with like 1.5 coats on the red ones. Once they were dry, I went ahead and hot glued the lid to one of the taller ones to make that the tallest of my pumpkins. Now, some of the glue did seep through, so I just took my finger carefully and wiped it off. After that, it is time to distress them. So I took my Waverly Antique Wax and my chippy brush, and I am just lightly brushing over each one of these pumpkins. Now, these red ones had kind of like a texture to them, so once I brushed this Waverly wax over it, it really highlighted the texture and brought it out. It looked so neat. I really loved how the distressing turned out on all 3 of these pumpkins. Now, for the stem of my pumpkins, I had these extra pieces of plunger that I cut down from other DIYs, so I just decided to use these. Ideally, I would have liked to go outside and grab some branches or sticks, but it was pouring when I was making this, and I did not have time to wait. So that's just what I decided to do. Now, one of my sticks was already painted brown from another DIY, so I just took a baby wipe and dipped it in my antique Waverly wax to faux stain the other 2. After that, I was just deciding which stem would look best on which pumpkin, and then I just used some hot glue to go ahead and hot glue them down to the middle of my pumpkins. Once they were glued down, it was time to accessorize. So the first thing I added were some leaves, and I'm just cutting off some leaves from one of those garlands from the Dollar Tree, and I'm adding 2 leaves to each one of my pumpkins. Now, I did make sure to kind of mix up the colors of leaves so that way there weren't 2 of the same color. I don't know why, I just thought it looked better like that. And originally I did only have 1 leaf on each one of these back 2 pumpkins, but I do eventually add a second. So now I'm taking 2 different colored strands of the berry garlands, and I'm going to hot glue those down at the bottom of my stem, and I did wrap it around. Then I'm going to take a paintbrush and I'm going to curl them to make the tendrils of my pumpkin. And like I said, I have 2 different berry garlands here. So I have an orange one and then like a white and green one. So I'm going to do that to all 4 of those little ends. And then I hot glued the back of the berry garland down as well, so that way it didn't like push up. Next, I'm going to take this really pretty gold ribbon that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to make a very simple bow and then hot glue that to the bottom part of my stem. And then I also made a raffia bow out of green raffia, so then I'm going to hot glue that to the front of my ribbon bow. And as you can see, I'm just kind of fluffing up the raffia because I like it to kind of be wild and crazy, not just like one straight bow all the way across. So I'm just kind of moving my little vines around, making sure I have it exactly how I like. And then I'm going to take some twine and make a little twine bow and hot glue that to the front of my raffia bow. Now, I did make sure to keep my tails long on my twine bow. That way they drape over the front of my pumpkin and it adds a little detail to the front of my pumpkin. After that, I'm going to take these little berries that I got from picks from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to hot glue them underneath my raffia bow. And I have like these bigger orange and red ones, and then I have these like dark ones, the dark red ones. So I'm kind of using a mixture of both and just hot gluing them in. Now, then I repeat that with the other two pumpkins. So I do that same thing to the other two pumpkins. So I already did one, you watched me do my second, and then here is the third. Now, the third one is the shortest one, and that one is going to go in the front of the other two on my display, and I'm going to show you how I actually switched this one up a little bit. So because I arranged all of my accessories the same way, I'm just going to speed right through this. So as you saw, I added my berry garlands, and then my ribbon bow, my raffia bow. But before I tie my twine bow, I'm going to take a piece of twine and I'm going to wrap it around my stem and bring it underneath all of the bows and everything to the front. I should have done this at first, but I didn't think about it. And I am going to leave those little strings long. Next, I'm going to take these wooden words that I got in a pack from the Dollar Tree, and these are new, and how stinking cute are these? So I decided to go with welcome fall, but I didn't really want the welcome. So I just decided to use my scissors and cut the welcome part off, and then I cut off, you can see how the line extends past the F and the L, so I just cut those off too. Sorry, I'm a little out of frame. But after I got that all cut down, I took my Waverly Antique Wax, I dipped a baby wipe in it, and then I used that as a faux stain to stain my wooden word. And then I'm going to simply tie my word on the ends of the twine that we just wrapped around the pumpkin. Now, I loosely tied that on there because I wanted the word to hang in the front of my pumpkin. Then I did tack the word down with some hot glue. After that, I'm going to go ahead and make my little twine bow and hot glue that to my raffia bow. And then I'm going to take more of these little berries and I'm going to put those underneath my raffia bow. Now, I thought that I was done, but I really felt like it needed something more in the front of that smaller pumpkin. So I took this leaf wood cutout that I had from last year and dry brushed some antique Waverly wax over it using my chippy brush. And then I added some twine and then tied that around the front of my pumpkin. So I want the word fall to hang over my leaf. So I'm just kind of arranging it how I like, and like I said, I'm going to hang it in the front. So I'm putting my piece of twine underneath all of my bows and all of the accessories and everything. So I'm just going to tie it in the back and tack it down with some hot glue, and that completes these three little pumpkins. So now it's time to put them all on a display. So I grabbed this wooden charger that I got from Michael's actually, but I know that they have them at the Dollar Tree, and I simply just hot glued my pumpkins down. So I put the taller one next to the middle size and then the smallest one in front of both of those. And I love how this turned out. Then I just took it a step further and accessorized the entire thing with some pine cones and some little acorns. And how more fall can you get? I actually kind of think this is a little primitive as well, but it is totally rustic and totally my style. And I love it. What do you think? For my last DIY, I'm going to start off with this little Easter gnome that I had left over from obviously Easter. And I'm going to use my little scraper tool to pry up the carrot that is on the gnome and the nose, but you want to keep both of those things to the side because we will be using them. Then I realized that it was really easy to just go ahead and peel up all of that paper. So that's exactly what I did, and I used my scraper to help me do that as well. After I had my paper all scraped up, I took my pencil and I just drew lines of where I wanted to cut off the little bunny ears. Then I took my knife and I scored where I drew my lines a few times until I was able to bend them back and forth and break them off. After I had them both cut off, I took my sanding sponge and I sanded both of the sides down to make them nice and smooth. After that, I'm going to take this plaid scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby and I'm going to Mod Podge this on the top of the hat. So rather than tracing the hat on the paper and cutting it out, I'm going to go ahead and just apply Mod Podge and apply the paper on top. And then I'm going to use my scissors to go ahead and cut around it. Now I'm just kind of doing like a dry cut. I'm not getting as close as I can because after that, I'm going to take my sanding sponge and I'm going to sand the edges to make it that nice clean cut. This is your friendly reminder that if you're loving what you see today, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Not only does it really help my channel to grow, but it also tells YouTube that you're loving what you're seeing and that you want to see more. So YouTube will put more of my content in your suggested videos. So please give me a like. It would be truly appreciated. After I had that all sanded down, I took my ivory chalk paint from Waverly and I went ahead and painted the beard. Now first I did take a pencil and I outlined where I wanted the shoes to be. That way I knew not to paint those ivory because I'm going to paint those brown in just a little bit. But I did go ahead and give this one coat of ivory chalk paint. Then I put that aside to dry and I took another one of these pumpkin trays, and again by using my knife and just putting the knife in between the pumpkin and the holder, I'm just going to pry it off. Now this time I only need one pumpkin and I chose to use the solid one. Then I'm going to take my Waverly pumpkin chalk paint and I'm going to paint my pumpkin, and then after that I'm going to paint my stem with the chocolate brown paint. Then I'm going to use that same paint to give this the highlighting pumpkin lines. So to draw the lines, I'm just starting on one end and then I'm just making a curved line out, and then I'm going to repeat that and do it on the inside as well. And I really love how this one was painted. I almost like this one better than the first one I did in that first DIY. I don't know why, it just looks a lot better and more realistic. But I did go ahead and outline the perimeter of my pumpkin too. And then you're going to see that I kind of dry brush that paint in between all of the lines, and I just really love the rustic look of this pumpkin. Now, even though I don't need a carrot in this DIY, I do need those little hands. So all I'm going to do is take my knife and just cut around. Now, I'm not trying to get every little finger. I'm just going to cut around and make it rounder at the bottom. Then again, after I get both of my hands off, I'm going to cut them down to clean them up, and then I'm going to sand around the edges to make them nice and smooth. Next, I'm going to take that chocolate brown paint and I'm going to paint both of my little hands with that. Then, while I had the paint out, I went ahead and painted his little shoes. Next, I took my black Sharpie marker and I'm just kind of drawing some wavy lines to make it look like hair. And then if it got a little dark, I just painted over it with my ivory lines. And I just kind of did this until I got the look I was going for. Now, I did add the nose, so that way it helped me guide where those little hairlines would be. But look how cute that is. I think it adds a lot of dimension too. Next, I'm going to take that same gold ribbon that I used in the previous DIY, and I'm going to hot glue that onto where the paper meets his hair. So kind of like the brim of his little hat. Next, I'm going to take this canvas that I had from like a canvas board from the Dollar Tree, and I'm always using just the wood from that, but I always keep the canvas just in case it comes in handy, and it did this time. So all I need to do is cut off 4 little rectangles. Then I'm going to take a piece of twine and I'm going to glue it going across the fatter part of my pumpkin, and I'm going to hot glue it in the back. Next, I'm going to take the little rectangles I made out of the canvas, and I realized they were just a little bit too wide, so I took 2 of them and cut them in half to create 4 pieces, and then I'm going to fold those in half and kind of dovetail them like you would to the end of ribbons to make it look like a banner piece. And then I'm going to do that to the other 2 as well. Now you can see that I have some canvas there glued to my twine. I had tried to do this and realized they were way too fat and too big and they didn't fit, and then I had to pull them off. So then once I had them all cut down, I went ahead and hot glued them onto the twine to create a little banner. Next, I'm going to take my little hands and I'm going to hot glue those to my little banner as well. After that, I hot glued my pumpkin to my gnome, and I put the pumpkin all the way at the bottom of my gnome, kind of so it was covering his little feet. Next, I took his little nose and I just dry brushed some of that chocolate brown paint or chocolate bar paint on it just to add a little bit of highlighting and dimension, and I kind of just went around the perimeter. And then I went ahead and hot glued his nose in the middle of that ribbon. Next, I did decide to go ahead and tack down the little banner pieces, that way they didn't flip up. Next, by using that chocolate bar paint again, I went ahead and went around the edges of the hat to give that some highlighting as well, and to make it look a little bit more rustic. Then I went over those banner pieces to make those look a little bit more rustic too. Next, I decided I needed to add something to his hat, so I took this little leaf wood cutout, and it does have a clothespin on the back, so I did have to pry that off. It did take me a minute to get this off, I am going to be honest, but I just took my knife and did the same thing. I just kind of slid it back behind the clothespin and just broke it off, but you do want to be very, very careful not to break off the stem of the leaf. After I got the clothespin off, I just faux stained it by dipping a baby wipe in my Waverly Antique Wax. Now, I did start off with only one of these leaves, but in a little bit you're going to see that I actually add a second. So now I'm just kind of deciding where I want to put it, and I am just going to place it at the top of my hat for now. Then I took a piece of twine, and I'm going to make a little twine bow, and I'm going to hot glue that to the bottom of the stem of my pumpkin. Next, I'm going to take these black sticker letters that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to spell out fall, putting one letter on each pendant of my banner. Then, to secure my stickers down, I'm going to put a layer of Mod Podge over them. Then here's where I decided to add that second leaf. So I went ahead and faux stained that as well. And the cool thing is that this one actually turned out a little darker than that first one. So there is a little contrast between the two. So then I just decided where I wanted to put them, and I put them at the top of my hat and layered them on top of each other. Next, I took a piece of twine and I looped it to make a little hanger for the back. I thought this little gnome came out so adorable. This was actually kind of a dupe from something I saw from the Lakeside collection. I get that magazine and I absolutely love looking through it. Every time I get it, they have some wonderful home decor ideas. And when I saw it, I knew I could probably recreate it. And I'm so happy I did, and I cannot wait to display this fall. What do you think? All of these pumpkin crafts are getting me in the fall vibes, and I am so ready for that cooler weather to come, and oh, I cannot wait. I absolutely love fall. But how cute did all of these little DIYs turn out? You're gonna have to let me know down in the comments which one was your absolute favorite. I want to thank Giulia for asking me to collab with her today. I had so much fun creating all of this and putting it all together for everyone, and I cannot wait to see what she has for us. Don't forget to check out her video. It's linked in my description box below. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit that little notification bell so you're notified anytime I upload a new video. Then also give this video a like if you love what you saw. It is greatly appreciated. Well, until I see you again, I'll craft with you soon. Bye!